Hello, Gary here, and welcome to another episode of Lost Treasure Stories. Our first Lost Treasure story in this episode is coming right up. But first, I want to welcome all new visitors and let you know that we feature true, authentic tales of buried treasure in every state in the U.S. Most of our stories have never been seen or heard of anywhere before because they're from my private files from my historical research of over 45 years. I have hundreds of stories on file. We're going to read to you, word for word, the actual documents that the stories come from, so you'll have all the facts if you want to go out and search for the treasure. Due to some restrictions that I do have to use an IA voiceover as a narrator, so I hope you don't mind. Without that, I wouldn't be able to bring these stories to you. So my friend Rocky the Robot will be your narrator. Oh wait, he likes to be called Indiana Rocky these days. So let's get on with the first story in this episode.
This lost treasure story is from August 9th, 1904, out of Virginia, and the article goes like this. Hidden on the farm of United States Senator Thomas B. Martin, near Scottsville, Albemarle County, are thousands of dollars in coin, jewels, and plate, which were concealed during the war, and which have never been unearthed. When the federal forces drew near Albemarle, those who had valuables became alarmed and began to hide them. They were placed mostly in heavy boxes, in the beds of small streams. The gold and jewels on Senator Martin's place were buried by Charles Scott, who soon afterward died suddenly, telling no one where he put them. Their value is considerable. This lost treasure story appeared in a newspaper article August 25, 1829 out of Ohio. Yes, you heard that right, 1829. Just 55 years after the American Revolution. Here's how this old story reads. We are informed by persons, who have known something of the habits of Mr. Hand, that the account in our last, respecting his property, copied from a Troy paper, is probably correct. He lived in New Lebanon, near Stevenstown, and owned large tracts of land. He was a real miser, took no money but specie, which he hoarded up, lived penuriously, and dressed like a beggar. We are told that a few years since, he has owned about 100 horses, some of them 6 or 8 years old, not one of which had been broken. He has children who are respectable, and it is said, that by a will, made a few years since, which may have been altered, he gave to each of his grandchildren 1,000 acres of land. The heirs have been digging in various places to find a hidden treasure. It is reported that there is a man in this vicinity, who can point out a place on Mr. Hand's farm, where he was seen to deposit something from a bag. That's the end of the short article, but, even though it was said that he'd been seen in a place on his farm burying a bag, nothing was ever found. The article didn't give a first name for Mr. Hand, which wasn't unusual for a local newspaper article of that time period. It undoubtedly means that there was only one adult named Mr. Hand, living anywhere near that area. Here's a newspaper article dated August 23, 1916 that tells about lost treasure on the George Miller Farm in Missouri. A search for buried gold supposed to amount to at least $40,000, concealed in the foundation of a house, and at other places on a farm 2 miles from Drake, Missouri, in Gasconade County, by George V. Miller, wealthy farmer, who died in 1881, has found its way into the probate court of Gasconade County. The petition was filed Wednesday in the Gasconade County Probate Court, which requires all the heirs of Miller to appear for a hearing to determine Miller's assets at the time of the death. Former Senator Buell L. Matthews, with offices in the Central National Bank building, who represents part of the heirs, filed the citation papers. Gold pieces stacked on a tray 6 inches high. $40,000 buried in the foundation of a house, other large sums buried in out-of-the-way corners of the farm, and bills of large denomination found among the leaves of the family Bible formed the basis of some of the stories that have clustered around a Gasconade County treasure farm for 3 decades. Miller, who is said to have been an eccentric person, the wealthiest farmer in the county, and never to have put a cent in the bank, died in 1881. Before his death, it is said, he was accustomed to have all the money possible changed into gold. His only investments were real estate. The nearest bank was at Herman, Missouri, 20 miles away, and Miller never visited it.
Okay, a quick break here for a fact check. As I was researching this story a little deeper, it appears that there was no bank in Herman, Missouri until many years after Mr. Miller died. So either something is a little off in this newspaper article, or every single historian in Gasconade County and all the county newspapers are wrong, because according to the Gasconade County Historical Society, the first state community bank in Herman wasn't built until 1910, 29 years after Mr. Miller's death. So either this newspaper reporter just made this part up, or what I think may have happened is the reporter was interviewing someone for the story, and that person stated that Mr. Miller never went to the bank. And the reporter, not understanding that there was no bank to go to, misunderstood. Oh well, I'm trying to give the reporter the benefit of the doubt.
At the time of his death, it was understood by his 5 daughters that Lud Shade Miller, the only son, who had never married, was to have the home farm and to divide the estate when all the children were of age. He lived with his father on the farm until the latter's death. The 5 daughters, Mrs. Charlotte Miller Bieber, Mrs. Louisa Schneider, Mrs. Sarah Miller Bieber, Mrs. Edward Williman and Mrs. Mary Schult, all married wealthy farmers and remained in Gasconade County. They never ask an accounting, nor is there any evidence that any of the children ever searched for the buried treasure, until the death of L. Shade Miller, who had spent his life on the home farm. Lud Miller died in September 1915, at the age of 50 years. In October 1915, a month after the death of the younger Miller, the house burned down, and a strong box in which the elder Miller always kept all his papers was also consumed. The house was rebuilt by Mrs. Lydia Miller, wife of Lud Miller, and Daniel, his son. Judge Robert Walker and J. W. Ellis, prosecuting attorney, recently met with all the heirs and talked over the stories of large sums in buried gold. One of the daughters is prepared to state at the next meeting of the heirs, which will be before probate judge Theodore Graff, August 31st, that she saw the tray loaded with gold. The children say also that their father marked with a peculiar scratch every gold piece which he secured.
And now, it's time for the Lost Treasure Found stories.
This Lost Treasure Found story is from May 6, 1896. The Supreme Court has decided Jacob Schmucker of Seneca County may keep buried money to the amount of $10,000, which he found on his farm 2 miles from Tiffin. The farm formerly belonged to Samuel Cadwallader, a rolling stone that had gathered much moss. Cadwallader was eccentric and buried his money on his farm, the one now owned by Schmucker. When on his deathbed, he forgot to tell his relatives where the money was hidden. The heirs were forced to sell his farm and Schmucker bought it. On the day that he was moving in, his son and a dog were chasing a rat. The rodent ran into a hole and the dog began to dig for him and uncovered Cadwallader's treasure. Schmucker and his hired hand dug it up and the former went away to have it cleaned, promising, it is claimed, to divide it fairly between himself and the hired man. But he gave the hired man the cross, and the latter sued for his share. This gave Cadwallader's heirs a pointer as to the whereabouts of their ancestors' treasure, and they sued for it. The Supreme Court decides that the money shall remain with Schmucker. The heirs and the hired man are left out of the deal. This Lost Treasure Found story is out of Kinston, North Carolina, and is dated August 30, 1927. Jason Hicks, farm tenant, today exhibited 37 gold dollars found under the floor of an abandoned barn in Jones County. The barn was erected before the war between the states, and in the opinion of many residents of that section, The gold was hidden by some family, under the barn floor, during the 60s. The coins appeared to have been in a small box, fragments of which were discovered. Here's a story of lost treasure found out of Kentucky dated January 3, 1905. The snug sum of $2,800 in gold, which was buried in Mercer County, Kentucky during the Civil War, has just been discovered in a peculiar manner. The money was buried by an old man named Renierson, who was stricken with apoplexy and was unable to tell where the treasure was hidden. Henry Lewis bought the Renierson property. Mr. Lewis recently sheltered a tramp, who in return for the kindness, said he could locate running veins of water on the place by means of a forked willow twig. Mr. Lewis wanted water because of the long drought. The tramp pointed out a spot where water would be found. Mr. Lewis, the next day, discovered in the spot several tin boxes, which contained $2,800 in gold.
Okay, that wraps up this episode of Lost Treasure Stories. If you like reading Lost Treasure Stories, I have a couple of links in the video description box of my favorite all-time treasure books and magazines. These are classics. They're not being published anymore, so if you think you might want to add them to your library, try to act fast. They're getting harder and harder to find. Our next episode is coming soon, so hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it, and make sure you have your notifications turned on.